Welcome to GRE Snacks, snackable episodes about the GRE, GMAT, and graduate school admissions. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable GRE course that includes everything you need to ace your exam. It's a full textbook, videos on key topics, tons of GRE questions backed by our adaptive learning algorithm, a built-in study planner and essay grader, and full-length practice exams. You can try it out for free at achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast to save 10%. Now, let's get started. Today we've got Alison Miller with us, and Alison, I'd love if you could introduce yourself and your company.
I'm Alison Miller, and I am a longtime academic entrepreneur. Almost 26 years ago, I opened up a business specifically to help graduate students earn their PhDs called the Dissertation Coach, a coaching consulting company. And then during the pandemic, we began co working with our clients, which turned into a second business, the Academic Writers Space, also known as TAWS. And that's a co working space where academic writers from around the world get on Zoom and we co work live with each other. And then I sold the Dissertation Coach just about 2 years ago. And so my primary focus has been on TAWS and doing some public speaking. And yeah, I love supporting people in the journey from the application process all the way through to the other side of earning their degree and what comes beyond that.
Yeah, that's great. And this is right up your wheelhouse. We're going to be talking about academic writing today. And first, let's start out by just can you define academic writing as opposed to, I don't know, writing a blog post or whatever it is, or even writing an
Right.
essay in school? Because I
Well,
feel like
I,
it's even like the stuff you do in undergrad is not necessarily academic writing in the way that you're defining it.
academic writing is like writing that's done around a central line of thinking. Okay. Now it's going to vary depending on the field and the methodologies and the approaches and but it's writing where you are conveying and sometimes very complicated ideas to people, right? It requires, it's a kind of writing that requires a lot more thinking than we recognize. Blog post writing is a lot more casual. Academic writing, you're writing and you're adhering to a set of standards and ethics for how you go about doing your work. For example, we don't plagiarize, right? Now we could say we don't use ChatGPT to write our dissertation for us, right?
Right.
We that we're upholding level of standard, then we have to actually read other pieces of work and think critically about them. We have to identify some kind of gap in knowledge and find a suitable method for developing some degree of understanding given the gap that we've identified. We have to use theory. We have to be able to think conceptually. We have to be able to analyze and think. So the writing is really a way of conveying a form of thinking that is, it's like an intellectual Olympic event to be able to, but and it's something that we learn to do. And the academic
Mhm.
writing is also something that takes a lot of practice to do well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's just it's a critical skill for doing well in graduate school, right? It's cornerstone of your dissertation for sure, but also probably if you're going to get published and publish papers, if you're going to, I don't know, even just do well on your school assignments. And so I think the first kind of question is like, what makes good academic writing versus bad?
Wow, there's so many things that could be going on, but I think really good academic writing is clear. It's direct. The writer has a sense of the purpose of what they're writing and what they're writing with the reader in mind. Can someone else understand what I'm explaining? Have I given enough context? And it's interesting because good academic writing requires also the ability to exercise restraint and recognize when you don't actually, like some students will write, we call them the kitchen sink lit reviews, where they write about every tangent possible, or they really overdo it with the references. Good academic writing is also like getting to the point. Good academic writing has been edited for grammar and flow and coherence and clarity. It's not full of typos. And by the way, for everybody, please, before you submit your applications, read them out loud. Read them out
Oh,
loud.
interesting.
Yeah, so it's something that's gonna take everybody time and patience to develop your capacity to write well,
Mhm.
but you can. It's something that takes a lot of practice. You wouldn't expect yourself to get on the tennis court and play a great game. You would know you'd have to
Learn
practice
how to
for
play tennis.
yeah, you'd have to practice for quite a while. Academic writing takes a lot of practice.
And talk to me a little bit about that, because I think one of the things that we talked about in the prep for this was that, like, yes, academic writing takes a lot of practice. It's it's a lot of work, and it's also you don't want to be like writing for fun, right? Necessarily, but you also are going to be you're going to have plenty of academic writing to do with your school assignments, but that's all like playing in the real tennis match. So, how do you develop this like consistent sort of practice of academic writing, and how do you do it in a way where you can afford to be a beginner and improve your skills over time at the beginning of your journey?
One of the things that's really vital is that you actually start writing earlier. So if you're taking classes your first few years of grad school and you have assignments that are due at the end of the semester, like a bigger paper, if you wait until the weekend before, which by the way is what a lot of your peers are going to do, you don't get to really benefit from. I wrote a really rough draft of something. I stepped back, I edited it, I tweaked it, I asked for input. A peer in my program read something and told me if it made sense. I got so often what people do is they wait until it's a crisis and they heroically write this not dissertation, like a paper for a class right before it's due. Although some people write their dissertations right before they're due as well.
Not recommended, which is what we talked
Don't
about in the other
recommend it, but you
episode,
can
but
do
yeah.
it, right? You can't really do that with a dissertation for the most part, but the way that I think we get better at writing is by writing, having some distance from it, coming back, and through that reworking and that revision process, you start to get more experience. And fundamentally, honestly, good academic writing, you don't just develop a skill and now I just know how to write. The truth is, even tenured
Yeah.
professors who've been researching the same thing forever, they have to write really crappy first drafts very often and then work with it over time to get it to where it sounds like, presentable and there's something they can feel proud of.
And so when you're going through that process, are you bringing in like other people to give you feedback? Are you asking your professors for feedback? Like, I don't know. I mean, I assume like getting peers to give you feedback is fine. I just wonder how much time those peers have and whether they're going to be able to really give you more than like a
Yeah, I mean, it
skimming of
may or
it.
may not work. Sometimes it can be done mutually.
Yeah. So can
But
you
you
ask instead like your TA, or can you ask
yeah, you
your
can ask.
professor even though the professor's going to grade it later, right? Is that like a good
Well, you
idea?
can ask. They may not, but it is possible, like, that if it is possible, some professors actually set it up that you submit a draft along the way. That's a really good professor who knows to do that. But I will tell you right now, if you are in graduate school, make a point to meet with the professors and have conversations with them about the development of your ideas in these bigger papers that are due. That is really a smart thing to do. And don't do it in a manipulative kind of way, do it in an authentic way. But you're going to get better grades because you do that.
Even if you submitted the exact same paper, but one time you like went and showed them a draft and asked for their feedback and incorporated it, and the other time you just submitted it, it makes them think that you're listening at a minimum. I feel
And
like
you
that's
learn a
got to
few
be worth
things. You
something.
recognize a few things. Sometimes it might be with the specific writing where you keep getting this comment of what does it refer to? Because people will start sentences, it'll say it is. Well, we don't know what
Right.
it refers to. And they see that they're getting that kind of comment repeatedly. They realize, oh, now in the future when I'm writing, I'm on the lookout for that. I will catch myself writing that more often because it's been pointed out to me so many times.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think it's also different professors are different. They
Yeah.
care or emphasize different things, and learning what those things are is probably going to help your grades, but also it helps your writing because you're writing for an audience of
Yeah.
one, but you still are writing for an audience. And
I would
also, the revision cycle process is meant to be there for a reason, right? It's meant to help you strengthen your
exactly.
work.
All of you going to grad school is always be learning writing. skills. We don't arrive. We're just always learning how to write. Even after you successfully complete a project and now you're on a new project, you're going to feel like you're back at base camp again. Oh my gosh, I have to start all over again at the beginning? Yes, you do.
But also, like, you get better at it every time, climbing the mountain, so to speak.
You do get better at it, but you could move on to a different type of project where all of a sudden you need to learn new things and
Hmm.
you can get better, and be we can be in a situation where something using a new methodology, for example, and now we've climbed that mountain once again. But the more often you do it, the more confident you will be that you can learn and develop new skills as needed.
Yeah. And I want to also ask, I want to dig in on the feedback and revision portion of things. Specifically, how do you get good feedback that's going to level up your writing over time, and how do you get it consistently?
Okay. You can't be in total control of that because some programs do a better job of providing guidance and feedback to students than others. Some individual faculty do a better job than others. Eh,
Yeah.
There are
I
things I
guess it's
think
more
you
about like
can.
how do you find the right kind of feedback or how do you like ask for it
Yeah,
maybe?
I do think that being in touch with what am I needing? What am I struggling with my writing? Where do I most need feedback? First of all, you have to actually be open to feedback. A lot of people aren't getting feedback on their writing because they don't want to hear it because it makes them too defensive or makes them feel really badly. But you have to
Right.
remind yourself, I'm here to learn, and that means I need to have be willing to be a beginner and be willing to be humbled and to get feedback. If you start to ask people for feedback, hey, when I submit this, I would love it if you can write a cover note where you actually ask for specific feedback on things that you're struggling with. And they may have other feedback for you as well. But one way you can get better feedback is to ask for the feedback you think would help you on what matters, on in the different matters of your writing, like these different components.
And I think it's also like how do you find somebody that's willing to give you consistent feedback? Is it your professor? Is it your like mentor? I'm worried that like peers are not gonna get the job done, if that makes sense.
I think as you move along in a graduate program, actually sometimes peers give really effective feedback because they've been getting so much of it. And you might have you can tell have a bit of a more natural inclination or they had some experience before graduate school that was helpful, where some people academic writing comes more easily from. You can absolutely, yes, reach that's what I'm saying. When you submit something to a professor, actually write a cover note describing what kind of feedback are you looking for? What is that?
Hmm.
That can help them and then they know where to direct their feedback can be extremely helpful. And it also really the professor then can see you're someone who is actively seeking to develop their academic writing skills. They will enjoy that most likely and enjoy working with you as a consequence. It's
Hmm.
fun to teach people who want to learn.
Yeah, and I think like you touched on this earlier, but not just teach people who want to learn, but teach people that are not just showing up with their ego and being defensive, but also like willing to improve and willing to be a beginner again and listen to advice. And even if you were the most amazing person in your undergraduate program for whatever subject you were in, which is why you're pursuing a PhD, now you're in a new ball game, like the PhD ball game, and everybody there is like you. So yeah, that's all to say. I think that all kind of relates. I'd love to also, we've talked about a little bit of this, but I'd love to just ask, other than having a consistent feedback loop and support, like what are the other things that you can do to support your writing habit and improving your writing?
I think one of the most important things is to read a lot of other research. And you can read it certainly, and we do need to read it for understanding, like understanding the research that was actually done. And we can also read it to look at like the mechanics of it and how it's put together, what kinds of things go into, say, a method section if you're doing like let's say a some kind of social science study, right? How do people set up their dissertations and their intros and end them in their conclusions? Let me look at some examples of how other people have done that. When people who read a lot of articles, it's not like it immediately improves your writing, but you can discern things from it and use things as exemplars where you have a sense of and there's a range of ways that people perform academic writing. The outcome of the academic writing varies widely. And you can notice things like there are certain academic writers who write in a very direct and straightforward way. And if that's the way you like to communicate, you can look for examples of that. How do they do that? So I think doing a lot of reading can help you improve your writing. And then one other thing that really improves writing is engaging in writing through a developmental trajectory, like the natural developmental trajectory of writing for you. So, for example, it's a lot better for me if I rough out my vision for something that I'm writing. It's rough. And then I don't really personally outline, but you can. I do more of the bullet points. I just brainstorm what are the main points I'm trying to make to the reader.
Hmm.
Okay. And then I can decide I'm going to just do some rough fleshing out of a specific point. You see what I'm doing is I'm moving developmentally through the process as opposed to expecting myself to just sit down and okay, and then just be typing one beautifully formed sentence after the other. To quote Anne Lamott, who wrote Bird by Bird, that's like the fantasy of the uninitiated. Writing
Right.
is messy and clunky and all over the place. And the more that you let go into that reality and are willing to write that crappy first draft, in our community, sometimes we call it Frankenstein writing. Where you're writing in whatever form you are currently capable of doing. Now it exists outside of you and it can be worked with and shaped and improved with multiple points of engagement over time. So, more frequent engaging with your writing with lowered standards is a way to get a lot of writing done.
Yeah, and I think you touched on this a little bit, but going out of order, that's something I do. I will just, if something pops into my head and it's like the second to last paragraph, I just put it down anyway. I don't know, follow your brain.
You can
I mean,
parking it there.
yeah, you mentioned like academic papers and reading a lot. I'm curious, like, how I'm sure that there's a difference that between how most people would read a paper and how you would read a paper with an eye for improving your own writing. Can you like elaborate on that and what you're
Yeah,
looking?
I look at things like how do people organize their ideas? What kind of language do people use in, say, a section describing their study participants? I look at the beginning and how long until I kind of know where we're going with this. How much literature did they cite? And sometimes I actually see things that are telling me what I don't want to do. Is wow, I felt like I needed to take 3 breaths in the middle of the sentence. It just went on and on. Or I had to get out the dictionary to understand this. Did this need to be written in such like a dense way? Maybe, but is there it often has helped me realize that I want my writing to be more accessible to people personally. And I think we all have to make our own choices around that. And yeah, getting a sense of you start to be able to see that when you've read enough papers, you start to also see they're all like, oh, if you're focusing on a specific area of research, like some very narrow band of something about like math education, for example, and you're reading all these studies about math education in elementary school, study after study, you start to see there's like a formula. They talk about this, and then they talk about this, and they talk about this. And the formula might be a little bit different depending on the journal, right? It's also really helpful to look at dissertations or master's theses to see. Honestly, most of them, do you know what they are? We call them the minimal viable product. They're not public. They are a stage of someone's research, not the end of it. It's the minimal viable product. You need to demonstrate that you can do something where you actually thought a line of research through and you put something together that's reasonably coherent. You do not need to do something unless you're in a program where that it requires those. A lot of there's a lot of dissertations that are these 3-paper dissertations, like in public health, where you actually are supposed to publish them. But that's unusual. Most people are really doing a dissertation that is a stage along the way with their research.
Yeah, and I think it's so important that you're breaking these big projects into like manageable like chunks, right? What advice do you have for that? Or where do you typically put chunks in your own writing, maybe? Or
Yeah.
not chunks, but like, waypoints is not the right word. It's just like stopping points along the way. Yeah.
Yeah. I related to what I was saying earlier. I've learned that I need to do a lot of prep work before I can write. I need to do brainstorming. I might need to do research. I need to let something like a very rough iteration of what do I think I'm trying to do here. And so that I can start to see, I want to make these different points. I want to have these different sections. I want this piece of work to make this claim. I have to know, what am I trying to do here? And that might take me a little while to get to that. And so planning is harder in that phase where I might just be planning like an hour of brainstorming. I try to be more specific than that, like brainstorm about these points. And then I will actually plan time for drafting. Like, this is just rough drafting. I might even call it like crappy writing, Frankenstein writing, baby draft, come up with some kind of name that feels good for me. And then think about like, when in reality am I doing those things? Like for real. And and I find if I underplan my writing goals, interestingly, by underplanning, I do more than if I had overplanned.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Why do you think that is? Just it's more about just like you're just writing because you love it or some because you're letting the ideas flow or
I wish that was the case so much, Tyler. Um, Sometimes that does happen, right? Sometimes we can get into our flow with our writing where we're just like completely absorbed in it and we forget all else. That's wonderful when that happens. That doesn't just happen by accident, though. We have to create conditions in which that can happen. Because when I write with more or an amount that's not realistic for me, I'm now asking myself to do the impossible. And some part of me knows that. I'm already been set up to fail. And so that it creates pressure of like, I've got so much to do. Oh my gosh. And when I have a lot of pressure in my system because I'm faced with an unrealistic amount of work to do where I'm pretty much set up to fail, I'm anticipating the failure, which doesn't feel good. And I've got all this pressure in my system, which actually makes me less compatible with, if I'm like this notebook here, if this is my work, I'm less compatible with getting close and personal and really engaging with it because I've got all this pressure in my system. When you overinflate a tire on a vehicle, you make the car less fuel efficient. It's also dangerous, but it's less fuel efficient because that tire was carefully engineered so that with the treads, the way the treads are designed, that the tire's gonna make contact with the road in a specific way that gives you a certain kind of fuel efficiency. When the
Mhm.
tire is overinflated and is under all that pressure, the tire can no longer make quality contact with the road, and that's what causes the inefficiency. When you're really pressured by a plan that's completely unrealistic and there's no, I've got, oh my God, I have to work so hard. Now, the version of me who's here to work is actually less available to come into contact with the road. Does that make sense to you? Right.
Yes, yeah.
So when we underplan, we take the pressure off. So, for example, if I am leading one of my co-working sessions, I often am in a situation where I have about 30 minutes before the session, and my brain will go, okay, I'm going to do this and this. And I start to feel really pressured for time and I start to rush. And then I get to session and I feel like not in the zone that I want to be in, like here with myself. Versus if I say, okay, you know what? You're going to prep for session and have tea and toast. Okay. Or I'm going to send one email and prep for session. If I give myself a highly realistic amount of work to do in that half an hour, I have a different relationship with time. Because when I overplan, I'm going to believe there isn't enough time. And I will, in fact, be correct because there isn't enough time to do all that overplanned work. But there is time to do this more narrow band of activity. In fact, I'm under planning. It feels more realistic. I feel less pressured. It's much easier for me to move in and I'm more likely to engage. Truly, when you plan more, you do less. And when you plan less, you do more. And I think it's just very true for the vast majority of academics I encounter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting too because we just did a whole episode on the importance of planning, but I think there is such a thing as over planning, right?
Planning is where you're planning an amount of work that you just cannot do in that time frame. And it
Yeah.
can take practice to develop the capacity to underplan. It is a practice worth practicing. It'll make a difference.
Yeah. And that kind of ties into like my last question, which you've met a lot of people in academia and also through your business that do writing, or where writing is a major component of what they're doing, or certainly a major component of what they're doing with you. So what separates the good from the bad? Like what makes the good writers great, and how can you emulate that?
I think being stubborn and persistent, believing that you can learn, believing that with effort, through struggle, through repeated engagement, asking for feedback and support. If you need it, you can hire a consultant who can help you, some kind of like a mentor if you don't get that from within your program. Is that you realize you're on a learning journey and you may have, I think most people encounter certain struggles depending on how their brain is wired. And I think in grad school, we have to learn to work with the brain that we have.
Mhm.
I think we say in our community that PhD is for the stubborn. Yeah,
I think at the end of the day, it's like
for,
you have to be stubborn if you're
yes,
going to be spending this much time, as you say, it could be more than 5 years on a single thing.
yes. And Tyler, I would encourage your listeners before you start grad school, read a copy of a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Hmm.
And the last name is spelled Dweck. Look up her work and understand the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset, which I won't get too much into here. I had no idea what a fixed mindset I had in grad school. I thought that once I got there, they had made a mistake letting me in the program and that I wasn't actually smart, but I was articulate and I could trick people into thinking I was intelligent. So funny, that's what I thought. For a long time,
I
I
mean,
was possessed by that idea.
it's funny, I just don't, that's not how you come across to me, but
I was convinced of that. I truly was, but I really do believe that everybody, if you want to be on this journey and you're willing to like choose to believe that intelligence is malleable. That's what a growth mindset is. We believe that with effort, persistence, struggle, hard work, falling off the horse, getting back on the horse, trying again, trying different angles, believing that there is a way for you to learn and develop the skills. You don't need to be the best there ever was, but you can do like a dissertation or a master's that has integrity and that's good enough to earn a degree that you can learn. I thought that my intelligence was fixed. And so I felt like I had to do a song and dance and prove I was smart all through grad school. And if I could do it over again, I would have really been good if I had known. I don't even know if her research had been published that much when I started grad school, but you believe in growth, believe intelligence is malleable, and it will really help you on your journey.
yeah, I think that's such a great line to end on. This has been GRE Snacks, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Alison Miller from the Academic Writers Space. And Achievable has a great online GRE course, and you can try it for free by going to achievable.me.